everything. Success doesn't usually fail because people aren't talented enough. It fails because most people quit long before the results are supposed to show up, everything. We live in a world trained to expect speed, fast money, fast recognition, fast transformation. But the truth is quieter and far more demanding, everything. The most meaningful achievements move on a delayed timeline. Nothing great arrives on schedule for your comfort, everything. It arrives when you've endured enough days where nothing seemed to be happening. This audiobook is about the long game, the invisible years, the silent progress, everything. The discipline to keep going when the scoreboard hasn't moved yet. If you've ever wondered why your effort feels unrewarded, why growth feels painfully slow, everything, or why consistency feels heavier than motivation, this is where clarity begins. The idea of overnight success is one of the most damaging stories ever sold to ambitious people. Everything, it sounds inspiring on the surface, but underneath, it quietly destroys patience, confidence, and self-trust. Everything. We hear about someone who came out of nowhere, someone who blew up in a year, someone whose life changed overnight. What we rarely hear about are the years before that moment. Everything. The ordinary days, the invisible effort, the slow progress that didn't look impressive enough to post or celebrate. Everything. Most success stories are told starting from the finish line and narrated backward. The struggle is condensed into a single sentence. Everything. They worked hard. They stayed consistent. But those words don't capture the reality of waking up every day without validation, of putting in effort when no one is watching. Everything. Of questioning whether it's even worth continuing. Overnight success feels real only because the long preparation phase is hidden from view. Everything. Think about how often you've looked at someone else's results and immediately compared them to your own timeline. You see their achievement and assume they got there faster than you, everything, more easily than you. That assumption creates a quiet pressure inside your mind, a sense that you're behind, late, or doing something wrong. But timelines are almost always misunderstood. Everything. What you're seeing is the visible moment, not the full journey. Behind every so-called overnight success is a long stretch of boredom, repetition, and uncertainty. Everything. A musician plays to empty rooms for years before one song finally connects. A business owner experiments, fails, restarts, and doubts themselves long before revenue becomes consistent. Everything. A writer fills notebooks that no one ever reads before producing a piece that finally resonates. None of that is glamorous. None of that feels successful while it's happening. Everything. But it's exactly what makes the visible success possible. The myth becomes dangerous when you start expecting progress to look dramatic early on. When that doesn't happen, everything. Frustration sets in. You begin to think your effort isn't working, that you're not cut out for this, that maybe you chose the wrong path. In reality, everything, you're often right where you're supposed to be. Growth rarely announces itself. It happens quietly, accumulating beneath the surface long before it becomes obvious. Everything. There's a natural delay between effort and outcome that most people are never taught to respect. We plant seeds and expect fruit immediately. When nothing appears, everything. We dig the seed back up to check if it's working, not realizing that the interruption itself prevents growth. Success operates on a delayed reward system. The work comes first, everything. The results later, and the gap between the two is where most people give up. This gap is uncomfortable because it offers no reassurance. You don't get applause for consistency. Everything. You don't get recognition for showing up when it's hard. You don't get certainty that what you're doing will pay off. All you have is the decision to continue. Everything. That's why patience isn't passive. It's active endurance. It's choosing to stay committed without external proof. Consider how misleading social media and modern storytelling can be. Everything. You see highlights, milestones, announcements. You don't see the anxiety, the doubt, the false starts. You don't see the months where nothing happened, where progress felt invisible. Everything. Comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel will always make your journey feel slower and heavier than it really is. What if instead of asking, everything, why is this taking so long, you asked, what is this time shaping me into? Because the long timeline isn't just about the result. Everything. It's about building the capacity to handle the result when it finally arrives. Skills, discipline, emotional resilience, and identity all take time to develop. Without that preparation, everything, success often collapses under its own weight. Many people don't fail because they lack talent or intelligence. They fail because they underestimate how long real progress takes. Everything. They quit not because the path is wrong, but because their expectations were unrealistic. When you believe success should be fast, slow progress feels like failure. Everything. When you understand that success is slow by nature, the same progress feels normal. This realization can be deeply relieving. It allows you to stop rushing yourself. Everything. It gives you permission to be a beginner longer than your ego would like. It helps you trade frustration for patience and panic for persistence. Everything. You stop asking for immediate validation and start focusing on daily alignment. Did I show up today? Did I do the work? Did I move one step forward? Everything. Think about anything meaningful you've ever built or improved in your life. Physical strength doesn't appear after one workout. Trust doesn't form after one conversation. Everything. Confidence doesn't develop after one win. All of it is earned through repetition over time. Success is no different. It's not an event, it's an accumulation. Everything. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is redefining what progress looks like. Progress isn't always visible results. Sometimes it's increased clarity. Everything. Sometimes it's improved discipline. Sometimes it's simply continuing when you would have quit before. Those changes may not impress anyone else, but they matter deeply. Everything. They're signs that something is forming. There's also a hidden cost to believing in overnight success. It makes you chase shortcuts. You start looking for hacks, tricks, everything, and quick wins instead of mastering fundamentals. You hop from strategy to strategy, hoping one will finally make things easy. But ease rarely produces excellence. Everything. Mastery comes from staying with one direction long enough to understand it deeply. Actionable patience doesn't mean waiting passively. Everything. It means committing to consistent effort without demanding immediate payoff. It means setting standards for your behavior, not just goals for your outcomes. For example, everything. Instead of obsessing over when success will arrive, focus on what you will do daily regardless of results. Write every day. Practice every day. Learn every day. Everything. That's how momentum is built quietly. Another practical step is to stop measuring yourself against someone else's pace. Their resources, timing, background, everything, and opportunities are different from yours. Your only meaningful comparison is who you were yesterday. If you're slightly more capable, slightly more disciplined, everything, or slightly more focused than before, you are moving forward, even if it doesn't feel dramatic. The long road also teaches discernment. Everything. It shows you whether you truly care about the path or just the reward. People who only want the outcome rarely survive the process. Everything. People who learn to respect the process eventually earn the outcome as a byproduct. This is why slow success is often more stable and fulfilling than fast success. Everything. There will be days when the myth of overnight, most people don't quit because they're weak. Everything. They quit because they feel foolish continuing when there's no visible proof that what they're doing is working. Day after day, they show up, put in effort, make sacrifices, everything, and nothing changes on the outside. No applause, no sudden improvement, no dramatic signal that says, yes, you're on the right path. And over time, doubt creeps in. Quietly at first, everything. Then louder, it starts asking dangerous questions. What if this is pointless? What if I'm wasting my time? What if everyone else was right? What almost no one tells you is this thing. That phase isn't failure, it's formation. Progress, real progress, rarely announces itself early. It builds privately, silently, often painfully slow. Everything. And the reason the early stages feel the hardest is because you're paying the full price before you're allowed to see the reward. Think about how growth works in nature. Everything. A seed planted in the ground doesn't look productive at all. For days, sometimes weeks, nothing breaks the surface. From the outside, it looks dead. But underground, everything. Something intense is happening. Roots are spreading, stabilizing, anchoring. Strength is being built in the dark, because without those roots, everything, whatever grows above the surface, wouldn't survive the first storm. Everything. If you dug up the seed too early because you weren't seeing results, you would destroy the very process you were hoping for. Human growth works the same way. Skills, discipline, confidence, everything, mental strength, they all develop beneath visibility first, long before anyone else notices improvement, before outcomes change, before success becomes measurable. Everything. You are becoming someone different internally. But because we live in a world obsessed with quick feedback, that invisible phase feels unbearable. Take learning a new skill. Everything. The beginning is brutal. You're slow. You make mistakes constantly. You're painfully aware of how far you are from mastery. And because your effort doesn't yet translate into competence, everything. It feels like you're not improving at all. But what's actually happening is your brain is wiring itself. Neural pathways are forming. Awareness is expanding. Everything. You're learning what doesn't work before you can learn what does. The frustration you feel isn't a sign of stagnation. It's evidence that learning is taking place. Everything. The same is true with discipline. When you first try to change your habits, the effort feels enormous compared to the payoff. You wake up earlier, but you don't feel more successful yet. Everything. You work out, but your body doesn't look different. You save money, but your life doesn't feel richer. And because humans are wired to associate effort with immediate reward, everything, your mind starts resisting. It tells you the old way was easier. It romanticizes comfort. It whispers that consistency is overrated. What your mind doesn't understand is compounding. Everything. Compounding is quiet. It's unremarkable in the beginning. If you look at it too closely, it almost feels insulting. One workout doesn't change you. One focused hour doesn't build a career. Everything. One disciplined choice doesn't transform a life, but repetition does something strange and powerful. It stacks, it accelerates, and at some point, often much later than you expected, everything. The results start arriving faster than you can keep up with. There's a moment almost everyone reaches where quitting doesn't feel weak or impulsive. It feels reasonable. Everything. It feels intelligent. It feels like self-respect. You look at the time you've invested, the energy you've spent, the effort you've poured in, and you see little to show for it. Everything. The excitement that once carried you forward has thinned out. The progress you expected by now hasn't arrived. And quietly, almost politely, a thought forms in your mind. Everything. Maybe this just isn't working. That thought is dangerous not because it's loud, but because it's calm. It doesn't shout. It doesn't panic. It presents itself as logic, as maturity. Everything. As knowing when to walk away. This is where most people stop. Not at the beginning, when things are hard but hopeful. Not at the peak, when results are visible. They stop in the middle. Everything. Right where effort has increased but evidence hasn't caught up yet. Right where discomfort peaks and clarity feels foggy. Right before the breakthrough that would have justified everything. Everything. The human brain is wired to protect you from wasted energy. It constantly scans for signs that an action is producing a return. When it doesn't detect one, everything, it sends warning signals in the form of doubt, boredom, frustration, and fatigue. These sensations are not proof that you're failing. Everything. They are proof that you're operating beyond immediate reward. But the brain doesn't label them that way. It labels them as danger. Think about how this shows up in real life. Everything. Someone starts going to the gym. The first few weeks feel empowering. There's soreness, but also excitement. They imagine the future version of themselves and feel motivated by it. Everything. Then the weeks pass. The mirror hasn't changed much. The scale barely moves. The workouts feel heavier. And a quiet voice begins to say, this isn't worth it. Everything. Maybe your body just doesn't respond like other people's. Maybe you're pushing too hard. Maybe rest would be smarter. Or consider someone building a business, a channel, a skill. Everything. In the beginning, learning feels productive. Every small step feels like progress. But eventually the novelty fades. Growth slows. Effort increases. The feedback loop breaks. Everything. And suddenly quitting doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like cutting losses. What's really happening in these moments is not failure. It's transition. Everything. You're crossing from visible effort into invisible progress. Early gains are often quick because they come from obvious changes. Everything. Later gains take longer because they involve deeper restructuring, and deeper restructuring is uncomfortable. It demands patience without reassurance. This is the pressure point. Everything. The place where almost everyone misinterprets the signal. Discomfort at this stage doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Everything. It often means you've exhausted easy improvements and entered the phase where real change happens. The phase where identity shifts, not just outcomes. Everything. The phase where consistency matters more than intensity. But the mind doesn't like that phase. It prefers novelty, validation, and fast feedback, so it creates convincing exit narratives. Everything. It tells you you're being smart by walking away. It reframes quitting as self-awareness instead of avoidance. The key skill here is not blind persistence. It's discernment. Everything. Learning to recognize the difference between true misalignment and temporary resistance. Between intuition and fear wearing logic as a disguise. Everything. One way to tell the difference is to notice the timing. Quitting thoughts often appear right after you've increased effort, not decreased it. Right after you've committed more deeply. Everything. Right after the path narrows and excuses disappear. If you only want to quit when the work gets repetitive, lonely, or emotionally dull, that's not clarity, that's friction. Everything. Another signal is emotional exhaustion paired with intellectual justification. You feel drained, then you start building reasons. You look for articles, opinions, everything, and examples that support stopping. The decision feels researched, but it's driven by fatigue. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Everything. But it does mean the feeling shouldn't be in charge. Resilient people don't ignore these impulses. They study them. They expect them. Everything. They treat quitting thoughts the way a seasoned traveler treats bad weather, not as a sign to turn back, but as a condition to navigate. Everything. They understand something most people never fully grasp: progress is not linear, and motivation is not reliable. Everything. The middle phase of any meaningful pursuit feels slower because the rewards are delayed and the effort is no. Everything. There comes a moment in every long journey when motivation quietly leaves the room. Not dramatically, not with a warning. One day you simply wake up and the excitement is gone. Everything. The goal that once energized you now feels heavy. The vision that once pulled you forward feels distant. And in that moment, many people assume something is wrong. Everything. They think they've lost their drive, their passion, or their potential. But the truth is simpler and far more important to understand. This is not failure. Everything. This is the point where the long game actually begins. Motivation was never meant to carry you the whole way. It's a spark, not a power source. Everything. It shows up loud and emotional at the beginning, when everything feels new and possible. But motivation is unreliable. It responds to mood, comfort, sleep, validation, and results. Everything. When results slow down, and they always do, motivation fades. If your entire system depends on feeling inspired, you will stop exactly when consistency matters most. Everything. Think about how many times you've felt deeply motivated to change something. You planned it perfectly. You imagined the future version of yourself. You told people about it. Everything. And then life happened. Stress showed up. Progress slowed. The emotional reward disappeared. That's where most stories end. Not because the goal was impossible. Everything. But because the system required motivation to function. Playing the long game means accepting a hard truth early. Most of your progress will happen on days you don't feel like showing up. Everything. The people who succeed long-term are not more motivated than you. They are less dependent on motivation. They build structures that carry them forward when emotions cannot. Everything. This is where discipline quietly replaces excitement. Discipline is not harsh or dramatic. It doesn't shout. It doesn't post inspirational quotes. Everything. Discipline is simply the decision to act without needing to feel good first. It's brushing your teeth even when you're tired. It's showing up to work even when you're uninspired. Everything. It's continuing because this is who you are, not because today feels special. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is moving from outcome-based thinking to identity-based thinking. Everything. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this today?" you ask, "Is this the kind of person I've decided to be?" When action becomes tied to identity, emotion loses its control. Everything. You don't negotiate with yourself every day. You act from alignment, not impulse. Consider someone who trains regularly. On the outside, it may look like motivation. Everything. But if you listen closely, they'll tell you something different. They don't love every workout. Some days they feel heavy, bored, or distracted. But training is no longer a debate. Everything. It's part of who they are. Just like showering or eating, they don't wait to feel inspired to take care of their body. They do it because it's non-negotiable. Everything. The same principle applies to any long-term goal. Writing, studying, building a business, healing. Growth is sustained by systems, not feelings. Systems remove decision fatigue. Everything. They reduce emotional resistance. They make progress boring, and boring is powerful. Boring is repeatable. Boring is sustainable. A system can be as simple as a fixed time, a specific place, everything, and a clear minimum standard. Not a perfect standard, a minimum one. On days when motivation is gone, the goal is not excellence. The goal is continuity. You don't aim to do your best. Everything. You aim to do enough to maintain identity. This is where self-respect is built, not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through quiet consistency. Everything. Every time you show up when it would be easier not to, you send yourself a message. You say, "I can be trusted." That trust compounds. Over time. Everything. You stop relying on hype because you know you'll act regardless. Many people misunderstand discipline as punishment. They think it requires harsh self-talk or constant pressure. In reality, everything. True discipline is an act of self-respect. It's choosing long-term dignity over short-term comfort. It's saying, "I don't need to feel perfect to act responsibly." Everything. There's a story repeated in countless lives. Someone starts something new with energy. The first few weeks feel productive, then progress slows. Feedback disappears. No one notices. Everything. That's the invisible middle, the most dangerous part of any long-term effort. Motivation doesn't survive there, only systems do. Everything. If you prepare for that phase instead of being surprised by it, you gain a massive advantage. You stop asking, "Why don't I feel motivated anymore?" and start asking, "Everything. What structure will carry me today?" The question changes everything. Another critical shift is learning to lower emotional expectations. You don't need every session to feel meaningful. Everything. You don't need every day to feel productive. You only need to stay in motion. Long-term success is not built on intense days. It's built on ordinary ones that don't break the chain. Everything. There will be days when showing up feels pointless. Becoming the person who outlasts time is not about being the fastest, the loudest, or the most visibly successful in the room. Everything. It's about something quieter and far more powerful. It's about staying. Staying when progress feels slow. Staying when effort feels unnoticed. Everything. Staying when doubt whispers that maybe this isn't working and never will. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because time outlasts their patience. And the truth is, everything. Success doesn't reward intensity, it rewards endurance. Think about how many people start strong. They begin with excitement, energy, and belief. They buy the books, set the goals, everything. Make the promises to themselves. For a few weeks or months, everything feels possible. But then the days begin to look ordinary. The progress becomes subtle. Everything. The results don't arrive on schedule. And slowly, without a dramatic moment, they stop showing up. Not because they're incapable. Everything. But because they didn't expect success to demand so much waiting. The long game is uncomfortable because it asks you to work without applause. Everything. It asks you to trust a process that doesn't offer immediate proof. It asks you to keep building when no one is watching and nothing obvious is changing. This is where most people turn back. Everything. Not because the path is wrong, but because the timeline feels unfair. Yet the people who eventually succeed are rarely doing anything extraordinary in the beginning. Everything. They're just refusing to leave. Endurance changes you in ways motivation never can. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls with mood, inspiration, and external feedback. Endurance, everything, on the other hand, is rooted in identity. It's the quiet decision that says, "This is who I am," regardless of how long it takes. When you stop asking how fast you can win and start asking how long you can persist, everything shifts. Pressure eases. Comparison fades. Everything. The work becomes steadier, calmer, and more sustainable. Consider the person who trains consistently for years while others jump between routines. Everything. Or the creator who publishes content week after week with little response while others quit after a handful of posts. Or the entrepreneur who keeps refining, learning, everything, and adapting while competitors burn out chasing shortcuts. From the outside, it might look like nothing special is happening. But internally, something profound is forming: discipline, everything, resilience, and self-trust. These qualities don't just lead to success, they become success. Time has a way of revealing character. Anyone can perform well for a short burst. Everything. Anyone can look disciplined when results are fast. But who are you when progress slows? Who are you when effort feels repetitive? Who are you when no one is praising you for continuing? Everything. These moments quietly define you. They decide whether you become someone who needs constant reassurance or someone who moves forward regardless of recognition. Everything. The people who outlast time stop negotiating with discomfort. They don't wait to feel confident before acting. They don't interpret slow results as personal failure. Instead, everything. They understand something most people miss: delayed results are not denial, they are part of the design. Growth often happens internally long before it becomes visible externally. Everything. Skills sharpen, judgment improves, emotional control strengthens. You're becoming more capable, even if the scoreboard hasn't changed yet. Everything. There's a subtle confidence that develops when you keep going despite uncertainty. It's not loud or arrogant. It's calm, grounded. Everything. It comes from knowing you've already survived long stretches of doubt and still showed up. That confidence doesn't depend on outcomes. It depends on evidence of your own consistency. Everything. And once you have that, setbacks lose much of their power. They no longer feel like verdicts on your ability, just part of the process you're committed to. Everything. Endurance also changes how you measure success. You stop asking, "Did I win today?" and start asking, "Did I honor my standard today?" You judge your days not by dramatic breakthroughs, everything, but by quiet follow-through. Did you do the work you said you would do? Did you protect the habits that matter? Did you remain aligned with the person you're trying to become? Everything. These questions keep you steady when outcomes fluctuate. One of the most practical ways to play the long game is to shrink your focus. Everything. Stop obsessing over distant results and bring your attention back to the next small action, the next workout, the next page written, the next lesson learned. Everything. Time is intimidating when you stare at it all at once, but when you break it into manageable moments, consistency becomes possible. The long game isn't won in years. Everything. It's won in ordinary days repeated without drama. It also helps to expect boredom, expect resistance, expect moments where you wonder if this is worth it. Everything. These feelings don't mean you're off track. They mean you're deep enough into the process that novelty has worn off and discipline is being tested. Everything. Most people interpret this phase as a sign to quit, but it's actually a sign that you're doing real work now. This is where separation happens. Everything. This is where endurance quietly outperforms talent. Becoming someone who outlasts time requires letting go of urgency. Urgency creates anxiety. Anxiety creates impatience. Everything. And impatience leads to poor decisions, shortcuts, distractions, and quitting too early. When you replace urgency with commitment, you move differently. Everything. You make decisions based on long-term alignment, not emotional pressure. You stop rushing outcomes and start refining systems. And over time, this calm persistence becomes your advantage. Everything. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop needing proof to continue. When your reason for showing up is no longer tied to immediate validation, you become difficult to stop. Everything. External circumstances lose control over your behavior. You don't collapse when progress slows. You don't panic when results stall. You simply adjust and continue. This steadiness is rare. Everything. And because it's rare, it's valuable. Think of time as a filter. It removes the uncommitted, the impatient, and the easily discouraged. Those who remain are not necessarily more gifted. Everything, they're just more willing to stay. And staying long enough changes the odds in your favor. Skills compound. Networks grow. Opportunities appear. Everything. But only for those who are still there to receive them. As you continue on your path, remember that success is not a single moment waiting in the future. Everything, it's a relationship you build with effort over time. Every day you show up, you reinforce that relationship. Every day you choose consistency over comfort, you strengthen it. And slowly, everything, without needing to announce it, you become someone who can be trusted, with responsibility, with challenge, with opportunity. The goal is not to race time, but to outlast it. Everything. To become so steady in your commitment that time works for you instead of against you. To reach a point where delays no longer discourage you. Everything. Because you understand that endurance itself is shaping the outcome. When you commit to staying, really staying, you stop asking when success will arrive. You know that as long as you remain, everything, it eventually has no choice but to.